chemistry students, the last thing we need to talk about this chapter is atomic dot diagrams. Once you're able to calculate valence electrons, you should be able to draw dot diagrams for any atom. There are 3 simple steps to drawing a dot diagram. The first of which is determine the number of valence electrons. So for hydrogen, its electron configuration is 1s1. There is only 1 valence electron. Okay. Step 2, write the element's symbol. Okay. And then step 3 is draw the valence electrons as dots around the symbol. So we're not including any of the lower level electrons, just the valence electrons. And you draw them in a circle. We'll see once we get to an element with more than 1 valence electron, but in hydrogen's case, you'll just draw 1 dot above hydrogen. Okay, so boron. Boron has 3 valence electrons. I will write the element symbol. And then in the same way you space out electrons when filling in the electrons into the boxes, you're going to space them out around the symbol. So they don't double up unless they have to. Okay, carbon. Has 4 valence electrons. And then finally, nitrogen. This element has 5 valence electrons. Okay, so let's practice with a few more of the elements from the periodic table. I don't really want to play with the transition metals today, so let's just ignore them. I've already given you a few of the answers on the last slide, so let's fill those in as well. We've got hydrogen, boron, carbon, and we also did nitrogen. Okay, so let's do a few more. And this time, I'm going to give you some information about the element. You are also welcome to use your periodic table while we go through this. And then you're going to answer some questions about that element, okay? So let's start with helium. Here's the symbol, and it has 2 electrons total. How many valence electrons are there, and what is the correct dot diagram? Okay, helium actually has 2 valence electrons, and because it is in the 1s energy level, sublevel, it's actually full, and he's kind of a special case. I won't mark you wrong for this one. He looks like this. Okay, let's move on to the next guy, lithium, with 3 electrons. How many valence electrons, and what does the dot diagram look like? You should have found that there is 1 valence electron, and the dot diagram looks like this. Beryllium has 4 electrons total. How many valence electrons, and what does the dot diagram look like for beryllium? Okay, there are 2 valence electrons. And the dot diagram looks like this. We've already done boron, carbon, nitrogen. Let's skip over to oxygen with 6 electrons total. How many valence electrons, and what does the dot diagram look like? Let's do oxygen with 8 electrons total. How many valence electrons, and what does the dot diagram look like for oxygen? There are 6 valence electrons, and the dot diagram will look like this. Okay, let's do fluorine. Fluorine has a total of 9 electrons. How many valence electrons, and what will the dot diagram look like? Okay, so there are 7 valence electrons in our dot diagram. Okay. Neon, a total of 10 electrons. How many valence electrons, and what will the dot diagram look like? You should have found that neon has a full octet with 8 valence electrons, and his dot diagram will look like this. Okay, let's do one more. Sodium. 11 electrons. How many valence electrons, and what will the dot diagram look like? You should have found that there is 1 valence electron, and the dot diagram will look like this. Are you starting to maybe see a pattern here? We will look into the rest of this. It's getting kind of boring, I know. We'll look into the periodic table in more depth in this way next chapter.